Okay. Yaakov Avinu, he sends a message to Esav. He's on his way back. He's on his way back to Eretz Canaan. And he sends a message to Esav. Vahili shor v'hamor son ve'eved v'shivha. I have oxen, I have donkey, I have flocks, I have servants, I have maidservants. So the Chachamim ask, why is it that Yaakov Avinu, he emphasizes, he specifically points out that he has shor v'hamor. He's telling him, I have flocks, I have servants, I have maidservants, but he stresses that I have an ox and that I have a donkey. So the rabbis understand shor v'hamor in the context of the 12 tribes. Who's compared to a shor? That's Yosef. Yaakov Avinu's son Yosef is compared to a shor, to an ox. Who's compared to a hamor? That is Yisachar. Yisachar, like his father, is the Ish Tam Yoshev Ohalim. He is the one that learns Torah all day. He represents the Talmidei Chachamim, the Avrechim, the Rabbanim, like a donkey that can carry a heavy load day in and day out. Yisachar is able to diligently sit in the Bet Midrash, sit in the Kollel. He's able to sit day and night learning Torah without needing too much. So Yaakov Avinu is sending Esav a message, Vahili shor v'hamor. I'm prepared for you. I can confront you, because who do I have with me? I have Yosef and I have Yisachar. So I'm prepared for this confrontation. The question is, why is it that Yaakov Avinu is pointing out Yosef and Yisachar? The truth is, really, the question is on Yosef. Yaakov Avinu is coming to meet up with Esav. I understand that he's pointing out Yisachar, Yesh li chamor, I have a child who's diligent in Torah learning, Hakol kol Yaakov, v'hayadayim yedei Esav. Where's the strength of the Jewish people? The strength of the Jewish people is in our learning Torah, is in our tefillah. So when he wants to point out which son of his can help him defeat, can help him confront Esav, so Yisachar is the Talmid Chacham, Yisachar is the Ish Tam Yoshev Ohalim. But what's so special about Yosef? How is it that Yaakov is so confident? He's sending Esav a message, I'm coming to meet you, and who do I have? I have Yisachar and Yosef. I understand Yisachar. What's Yisachar's superpower? That he's able to learn Torah all day. He's the Talmid Chacham. He's the rabbi. But what's Yosef's superpower, so to speak? What is it that makes Yosef so special that Yaakov Avinu is now confident, so to speak, that he can confront Esav? And if you have to choose between Yosef and Yisachar, who was more important to Yaakov in this confrontation with Esav? If you go back to last week's parasha, what does it say about Yosef? It says, Rashi explains, Mishenolad setano shel Esav. Yosef is described as the antagonist of Esav. He's the one that's able to confront Esav. He's the one that's able to antagonize Esav. And here's the famous line, Shene'emar, V'hayabet Yaakov esh. The house of Yaakov is compared to fire. Ubet Yosef lehava. And the house of Yosef, his son, is a flame. Ubet Esav lekash. And the house of Esav is compared to straw. That means to say that in facing Yosef, Esav is reduced to straw. Yosef is a flame, Esav is like straw, and Yosef is able to consume Esav. But once again, the question still stands. What is it about Yosef that he has this unique ability that even Yaakov Avinu recognizes that in his confrontation with Esav, that once he had Yosef, yes, he sends Esav a message, Yesh li shor v'chamor, I have an ox and a donkey, I have Yosef and Yisachar. But if you look at last week's parasha, who's Yaakov Avinu really relying on? He's really relying on Yosef. Yosef is so powerful that as powerful as Esav is, he's nothing more than like straw to a flame. When it comes to Yosef, Yosef is the flame, Esav is straw, and he doesn't stand a chance before Yosef. What exactly is special about Yosef? Once again, I understand what's special about Yisachar. It's the Talmud Torah, the Ish Tam Yoshev Ohalim. But what's Yosef's superpower? That's not clear from the Pesukim. That's not clear from the Pirushim, even from Rashi. It's not clear what exactly is Yosef's superpower, that he is the most suited to confront Esav, that Esav becomes like straw that's able to be completely consumed, completely burnt up when he meets up with Yosef. Yosef is a flame and Esav is straw, and Esav does not stand a chance in front of Yosef. So if we want to understand the superpower, so to speak, if we want to understand Yosef's superpower, we have to understand Yosef's mother. We have to understand Rachel Imenu. Rachel Imenu, what was her superpower? She had, it's really in two areas, which really are both the same. She had incredible self-control. We just said earlier that not only did she not reveal to Yaakov Avinu that it was Leah, she was able to control herself to the point that she gave up on her destiny. She gave up on her husband for her sister. She had such incredible self-control that she didn't say anything. Did you ever have something on the tip of your tongue and you wanted to share it with someone? Literally, you need to put on a straitjacket not to share it. Right? Sometimes it's just there. You just can't help it. You can't hold back. Rachel Imenu knew that her father made the switch, obviously. She knew it was Leah who was going to marry Yaakov and not herself. But she demonstrated such discipline and such self-control, superhuman self-control. But it wasn't only on the day of her wedding. For seven years, Yaakov was working for her. 7 years he was sending her presents. And for 7 years, the presents were not reaching her. They weren't getting to her. Where were the presents going? Lavan was taking the presents and he was giving them to Leah. He wasn't giving them to Rachel. So for 7 years, she's keeping quiet. And then the day of her wedding, she keeps quiet. That is superhuman self-control. That self-control, and we're going to explain it a little more, that self-control was passed on to her descendants. What's another aspect of Rachel Imenu? Who was the one, Lavan Harami, her father, worshipped idols? Who was the one who took the idols? It was Rachel. Why Rachel? Because Rachel had the unique ability, by the fact that we see that she was the one who took her father's idols, and we said this last week, she had the unique ability to neutralize evil. She had the unique ability to destroy evil. It was her and not her sister who took the idols of her father, the terafim, as the pasuk puts it, because she had the koach, she had the ability, she could neutralize evil. Now those two aspects of Rachel, superhuman self-control and the ability to neutralize evil, that was given over to her descendants. Yosef, we see, he faced one of the most difficult trials, one of the most difficult tests in the entire Torah, certainly in the Chamishei Chumshei Torah. He was able to fend off the advances of Potiphera. Where does Yosef get such strength? Where does he get such character? He's a direct descendant. He's the son of Rachel. He has the ability, he has superhuman self-control. What does Esav represent? Let's answer the question now. Let's go back to the question. The question was, I understand what Yisachar's superpower was. I understand why Yaakov is telling Esav, I have Yisachar. Yisachar represents Talmud Torah. But what was Yosef's superpower? Esav was the epitome of materialism, of physicality, of the physical. He was an extremely materialistic person. Yosef represented subjugating the physical, subduing the physical, controlling the physical. Yosef didn't give in to his desires. He didn't give in to his passions. He didn't give in to his urges. He was 100% in complete control. Someone who's 100% in complete control, they can subdue evil. They have the power. Esav represents the physical, the materialistic. Yosef represents that superhuman self-control. Because he had superhuman self-control, then he could bring the physical and the materialistic under control. He can neutralize evil. He can neutralize Esav. Why can he neutralize Esav? Because he innately had this superhuman, this incredible discipline. He didn't give in to his materialistic urges. He didn't give in to his materialistic passions. He was in complete control. By the fact that Yosef was in complete control of his own materialism, he's able to control the physical in the world. He's able to control the material in the world. Therefore, he's able to neutralize him more than any other of his brothers, more than any of the tribes, is able to control and to neutralize Esav. Why? Because he's in complete control of his own physicality. A person that's able to completely command his own physicality, his own materialism, then he's given that koach to control the material world, and therefore he can neutralize Esav. That was Yosef's superpower. Now we understand why Yaakov said he's coming b'shov v'hamor. I'm coming with Yosef and with Yisachar. Yisachar represents the koach of Torah. Yosef represents the koach of superhuman self-control. When a person is in complete control of their passions, of their desires, of their urges, then a person can control the physicality and the materialism in the world. It's not a coincidence. Who gave out in the 7 years of famine later on that we're going to read about? Who's distributing food to the entire world? It's Yosef. How did Yosef get into such a position that he's in charge of all the food source? He's in charge of all the mazon, all the food in the world. He's in charge of distributing it. Because since he had complete self-control over himself, since he was able to fend off, to resist the advances of Potiphera, he is now able, he gets this koach from Shamayim. They give the koach to a person that they can control the world. They become the one in charge. So that's why not only did Yaakov have Yisachar, who represents Talmud Torah, he also had Yosef, because Yosef has this power. He has complete control over himself, therefore he has complete control over the physical and the material aspect of creation. It's also not a coincidence. The entire house of Yaakov, they end up in Egypt. Egypt was the most lewd, evil place on the planet. How are the Jewish people going to survive there for 210 years, for 400 years or 210 years? It's not a coincidence that the first Jew to go into exile is who? Is Yosef. Why does it have to be Yosef more than any of the brothers that sold into Egypt? It's Yosef that ultimately paves the road. He's the one that brings his entire family. Yes, there's a decree against the Jewish people that they have to go into exile. But how do they end up in exile? Yosef goes first and then they all follow. Why did it have to be that way? Because since they're going to end up in Egypt, which is the most evil, which is the most lewd place in the entire world, somebody has to neutralize that evil. Someone has to pave the road for them. Who out of all the tribes has that power, has that strength, has the superpower to neutralize evil and bring the physical and the materialistic under control? That's Yosef. So that's why of all the tribes it had to be that Yosef goes first, and so to speak, he paves the road for them. So much so that had Yosef not paved the road for them, it could be based on what we're saying, that the Jewish people would have been lost in Egypt. It would have been too lewd, too evil. They wouldn't have been able to handle it. But because Yosef is the one that goes first, and on an esoteric spiritual level, he begins to neutralize the evil, he's paving the way for the Jewish people, that's his koach, that's his power. Where does he get that power from? He gets it from his mother. Who takes the idols of Lavan? It's Rahel. She passes on that incredible superhuman self-control to her children, to her descendants. She passes on this ability to neutralize evil to her children, to her descendants. So that's why Yaakov has to say, who am I coming with? I'm coming with Yisachar, which represents the power of Torah, and I'm coming with Yosef, which represents the power of self-control, of being able to dominate, to control the materialistic and the physical world. That's the deeper idea behind Vahi li shor v'hamor. Okay, let's go. Now we can get into the class. Now that we have the entree, we have the appetizers, we can jump into the class. We know that the Torah, what does the word Torah mean? Torah is milashon hora'ah. What's hora'ah? To guide, to teach. The Torah is a guidebook. The Torah is a book, it's a textbook, it's a guide how to live life. There is no parasha that is more true than this week's parasha. What do they call this week's parasha? What do the Chachamim call Parashat Vayishlach? They call Parashat Vayishlach Parashat Hagalut. What does Parashat Hagalut mean? It is the parasha of exile. If a Jew wants to know how to conduct themselves, how to behave, how to act, how do I live in exile? How do I live amongst the Goyim? How am I supposed to act? How am I supposed to behave? How do I interact with the Goyim? Which parasha do they study? Which parasha do the Chachamim tell them to study? Parashat Hagalut. So much so that when the Jewish leaders, when they used to meet with the Roman Caesar, what was their preparation? What was their hachana? How did the Rabbanim, the Chachamim, how did they prepare to meet the Roman Caesar? Before they would embark on their trip to meet with the Roman Caesar, what would they study? What was their preparation? Parashat Vayishlach. They would study Parashat Vayishlach. Why Parashat Vayishlach? Because here we see how Yaakov prepared himself, how he conducted himself, how he interacted with Esav. You see, at this juncture in time, up until now, what's Yaakov Avinu? So for the early part in his life, he's the Ish Tan Yoshev Ohalim. He's sitting in the Bet Midrash. He's sitting in the Bet Knesset. And he's learning Torah all day. Doesn't have a bother in the world. Even after he gets married, he has 4 wives, and he's already in the working world, so to speak, but he's able to carve out for himself a cocoon, so to speak, in his father-in-law's house, Lavan. As terrible as his father-in-law was, and he was one of the most terrible people to ever grace the planet. Lavan was one of the most wicked people. He was essentially a wizard. He was one of the most wicked people in the history of the world. But Yaakov managed to kind of carve out a cocoon for himself in his father-in-law's house. But comes Parashat Vayishlach. At this point, as the expression goes, he is now fully exposed to the elements. He is fully exposed to the outside world. He is no longer just sitting he's no longer just sitting in the Bet Midrash. He is no longer in his cocoon, so to speak, in his father-in-law's house. He is now a Jew in exile. He is now a Jew in the world. It's like a person, he grows up, he goes to yeshiva, mainly sticks to his area, maybe goes to Eretz Yisrael to learn, gets married, he's able to continue learning for a few years, and then he has to go into the world. Then he has to go into the working world. This is Parashat Vayishlach. He went from being a Bachur Yeshiva, he went from his father-in-law's house, as terrible as it was, he was able to carve out a safe space, right? That's the lingo today. Carve out for yourself a safe spot, a safe space. He was able to carve out for himself a safe space in his father-in-law's house, but now he's fully exposed to the world around him. There's no more hiding, so to speak. There's no more cocoon. So if you want to learn, how does a Jew interact? How does a Jew live? How do you conduct yourself in exile as a Jew in exile? The Chachamim tell us, which parasha do you study? You study Parashat Vayishlach. So much so, this is learned, the famous Midrash from Rabbi Yanai. Before, like we said, before Rabbi Yanai used to go to see, when they would have to have meetings, interactions with the Roman Caesar, they used to study Parashat Vayishlach. One time, just going to find it. One time, Rabbi Yanai, the Ramban quotes it in this week's parasha. He forgot to study the parasha before he embarked on his trip to the Roman Caesar. Before he embarked on his trip for Klal Yisrael, he forgot to study Parashat Vayishlach. And let me see if I can find it inside. He forgot to study Parashat Vayishlach, and he almost lost his life. Why? Because he allowed the Roman officers to accompany him. What he should have done when the Roman officers offered to accompany him, he should have rejected their offer. He did not reject the offer. He did not review this parasha when Yaakov Avinu rejects the offer of Esav to accompany him. After they make up, after they hug, and they get reacquainted, Esav says, allow me to accompany you and your children. And Yaakov, very politically correct, very nicely rejects his offer. Rabbi Yanai did not review this parasha before, and they almost killed him. He almost lost his life. That is how critical, that is how powerful, how critical this parasha is to the Jew in exile. You want to know how to conduct yourself, especially when you're meeting with government officials. You have to study this parasha. I'll tell you an incredible, something incredible in history that not many people know. Before the Abraham Accords, what was the most historic peace treaty that Israel signed? With which country? Which one was the most historic? With Egypt. The most historic peace accord, I believe it was in 1979. In 1979, they signed a historical peace accord with Egypt that stands to this day. It's a bit of a cold peace, but it's a peace nonetheless. I don't remember I don't remember.
No, that's something else. No. Okay.
So we have, how did it come about? I shouldn't say how did it come about, but there's an interesting story before they began negotiations. Menachem Begin was in New York, and they were about to embark on negotiations to make peace between Egypt and Israel. So he went to Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, he went to the leading rabbis in the United States, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, Rav Moshe Feinstein, Rav Soloveitchik, and he asked them for advice. How do I go about this? What did they tell him? Study Parashat Vayishlach. You want to know what to do? You want to know how to go about the negotiations? How to conduct yourself? Study Parashat Vayishlach. Parashat Vayishlach is the parasha when Yaakov meets Esav. Esav is a prominent official, is a prominent authority. It's his brother. You want to know how to conduct yourself? You want to know how to interact? You want to know how to go about these negotiations? Study Parashat Vayishlach. This is a footnote in history that's not so well known, but nonetheless is a historical fact. This is the advice that the leading rabbis of that generation said to Menachem Begin. You want to succeed? You want to do things right? Study Parashat Vayishlach as you embark on negotiations with Egypt to make peace. And Menachem Begin did follow their advice, and we could say till today, may not be a perfect peace, but that peace is still holding until today. So we see how crucial, how critical this parasha, not to be underestimated. So one of the pesukim along these lines, we're talking about the galut, we're talking about the Jew in exile. One of the pesukim that rabbis like to speak about, and maybe you've heard a shiur on this pasuk, we'll discuss it and we'll try to find some new angles to it, is Yaakov Avinu hears that Esav is on his way. So Yaakov Avinu, he tells Hashem in his prayer, Hatzileni na miyad achi miyad Esav. Amongst the famous pesukim from the Torah, last week the famous pasuk was Hakol Kol Yaakov Vayadam Yedei Esav. This week, perhaps the most famous pesukim, and there's a lot of big events in this week's parasha. Yaakov Avinu comes to the Borei Olam. He says, Hatzileni na miyad achi miyad Esav. The messengers come back to Yaakov Avinu, and they tell him he's coming back, and he's coming with an entire army. He's coming for you. Yaakov begs Hashem, save me from my brother, save me from Esav. So all the rabbis, they ask the Chachamim ask the same question, and all the shiurim, it's the same point. Why is Yaakov Avinu, when he's praying to Hashem, why does he emphasize Hatzileni na miyad achi miyad Esav? Save me from my brother, save me from Esav. Either say, Hatzileni na miyad achi, save me from my brother, or say, Hatzileni miyad Esav, or save me from Esav. But why does Yaakov have to spell it out, so to speak, for God? Hatzileni na miyad achi, save me from my brother, miyad Esav, from Esav. Famous question. So the Or HaChaim deals with this question. He gives this answer. He gives a beautiful answer. He gives a number of answers. One of the answers that the Or HaHayim gives is that what's Yaakov Avinu praying for? Yaakov Avinu and Esav, they're both children of Yitzchak, and they're both descendants. Yitzchak is their father, Avraham Avinu is their grandfather. That means they both have Zechut Avot. That means they both have the merit of their forefathers. What's Yaakov praying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Please, save me from my brother. I know that I have the merit of my forefathers, but he's my brother, so he also has the merit of Avraham and Yitzchak with him. Save me from him. Don't tip the scale in his favor because of the merit of Yaakov, of Avraham and Yitzchak. We're brothers, so we both have the merit of Yitzchak and Yaakov. Hatzileni na miyad achi. Don't allow the merit of Avraham and Yitzchak to tip the scale in his favor. That's why it doesn't just tell God Hatzileni miyad Esav. Esav represents Esav the wicked one, Esav the strong one, the mighty one. Save me from his might, save me from his strength, but he also has another strength. What's his other strength? He's a child, he's a descendant of Avraham and Yitzchak. I'm also a child, I'm also a descendant. Maybe that will outweigh between his strength and his might, and the fact that he's a descendant of Avraham and Yitzchak, that will outweigh, you could tip the scales in his favor. Hatzileni na miyad achi. Even though he's my brother, and he has the same father and the same grandfather, save me that shouldn't tip the scales in his favor. That's how the Or HaHayim HaKadosh understands Hatzileni na miyad achi, miyad Esav. A second explanation, Hatzileni na miyad achi. He was telling Hashem, look how wicked Esav is. Hatzileni na miyad achi. Even though we are brothers, he still wants to kill me. He's pointing out his wickedness, his evilness. Save me from my brother. Why is he pointing out my brother? Even though we're brothers, he still wants to kill me. What a wicked individual. Miyad Esav, and in Esav in general who's wicked. So he was pointing out two evils here. One evil, that even though he's my brother, he still wants to kill me. That's an evil within itself. And then Miyad Esav the evil one. And then there's the third explanation. This is the most famous explanation. This is a well-known, maybe you've heard it in other lectures. Once again, what's the question? Why does Yaakov have to emphasize Hatzileni na miyad ahi, miyad Esav? Because what's Yaakov really here? He's not praying one prayer to God. He's praying two prayers to God. What are the two prayers he's praying to God? The first prayer is Hatzileni na miyad ahi. You see, Esav, he can destroy me in two ways. The way we're most familiar with, he can come and he can kill me. He can murder me. He can commit genocide and eradicate my entire family. But that's not the only Esav I want you to save me from. That's not the only situation I want you to save me from. That's Hatzileni na miyad Esav. When Esav wants to murder me, when Esav wants to kill me, when Esav hates me, save me from Esav when he hates me. But there's another situation I want you to save me from. Hatzileni na miyad achi. Save me from him when he loves me, when he's in lockstep with me, when there's camaraderie between us, when there's brotherhood between us, because that is as dangerous as the Esav, as dangerous as he is when he hates, when he wants to kill me. He is as dangerous, and we're going to see in a second, even more dangerous when he wants to fraternize with me, when we're living together in love, in peace, in brotherhood. Why? Because then we assimilate. Then we learn from him. Then the Jewish people are lost. That is the explanation. Once again, it's been said so many times. Hatzileni na miyad achi. That's the first prayer. Save me from him when he's truly my brother, when he's in lockstep with me, when he wants to fraternize with me, when he wants to be my friend, when he wants to be my brother. Save me. Because then I could be influenced, my children could be influenced, my descendants could be influenced, and then they're going to assimilate. Miyad Esav, and certainly save me when he wants to murder me and to commit genocide. Those are the two situations that Yaakov was praying to Hashem. In both of those situations, I'm in danger. My children are in danger. My descendants are in danger. The Jewish people, it's an existential threat. Not only is it an existential threat when he wants to commit genocide, when he wants to be Esav, it's also an existential threat when he wants to be my brother, when he wants to live in peace, when he wants to fraternize. That is also an existential threat. Yaakov Avinu recognized that, and he was praying to God, not only in his time, but for all future generations, when we live in peace, when they open up their borders to us, when they open up their countries to us, when they allow us to live as first-class citizens, make sure that I don't get lost, that my descendants don't get lost amongst them when they're being nice to us. This happens twice in this week's parasha. We're going to go into it now. And it's also a fantastic introduction to Chanukah. It doesn't happen this year, but some years Chanukah falls out on Parashat Vayishlach. Always when you have a Yom Tov that falls out with a parasha, you look for allusions, you look for hints, you look for connections. Even though that this year Parashat Chanukah falls out on Parashat Vayeshev, next Shabbat is Parashat Vayeshev, but this week we're already getting into Chanukah. How are we getting into Chanukah? If you look in the parasha, you already see the subject of Chanukah. What was the subject of Chanukah? What was the threat? Was there an existential threat on Chanukah? Yeah. Like Purim, like Pesach, there was an existential threat. What was the threat of Chanukah? Assimilation. It wasn't genocide. It wasn't a Holocaust. Nobody, so to speak, had to die here. They were killing the Jews because they weren't following their rules, but no one had to die. What was the threat by Chanukah? Assimilation. We don't want to kill you. We don't want to murder you. We want to assimilate you. Just learn what we tell you to learn. We want the majority of the Jewish people in the time of Chanukah, in the time of that period of the Second Temple, had become Hellenized. They had assimilated to the Greek culture. The Hashmonaim, the Maccabim were just a very small group. The overwhelming majority of the Jewish people had assimilated into Greek culture. This is what Yaakov Avinu was afraid of. This is the introduction. Chanukah's Thursday is Bezrat Hashem is next Thursday night. We're going into Chanukah. This is already Yaakov foresaw. I'm not only praying to save me from Esav, save me when they don't want to kill me, when they don't want to destroy me, when they don't want to commit genocide. When they're ready, they want to live in lockstep, they want to live in brotherhood. He was asking to be saved for a time like Chanukah. But before we get to Chanukah, it comes up twice in this week's parasha. Where do we see this brotherhood, this threat, this small threat or large threat? Once they meet up, Esav makes Yaakov Avinu an offer. What's the offer? The offer is, why don't we go back together? We're going in the same direction. Let's go back together. What does Yaakov Avinu answer him? Vayomer, Esav says to Yaakov, Vayomer nis'a v'nelecha v'elcha lenegdecha. Let's travel together. Let's see what Rashi says. Nisa. Beshavela, let's walk together. Tovazo esela she'a'arich yemei malachti. I will elongate. For me, if I walk together with you, if I travel together with you, that will make my trip so much longer. This past summer, my brother got married in Montreal. So people don't. I'm from Toronto originally. So we went from, people usually drive from Toronto to Montreal. People don't really fly. It's about a 4 or 5 hour drive tops, right? 4 or 5 hours. With my kids, somehow, I don't know how it took us 9 hours. We definitely made a record there. I don't know how that happened, but it took us 9 hours to get from Toronto to Montreal, and everyone can do it in 4 or 5 hours. I think we made every single pit stop possible. We stopped at every single. But Esav tells Yaakov, Esav could do this trip very quickly. But he tells Yaakov, Tova zo e'esela she'a'arich yemei malachti. I will elongate my trip. Even if it takes me double, triple the time. I know you have a family. I know you go at a much slower pace. Lalechet le'at kasher ata tzarich. I will go at your pace. You dictate the pace. Vezehu lenegdecha b'shavel lecha. What does Yaakov say? What's Yaakov's answer? Vayomer elav Adoni yodea ki hayeladim rakim ve'hatzon ve'abakar alot alai utfakum yom echad v'metu kol hatzon. No, it's okay. It's going to take way too long. The children are small. We're going to be making a lot of stops along the way. It's going to be too taxing on you. You go on ahead. We'll catch up, which Yaakov never caught up to him. This is, Esav says, look, let's travel together like brothers, like old times. Let's make a road trip out of it. You and me, my people and your people, me with my people, you with your family. This is Hatzileni na miyad achi. This is the first instance. I don't want to travel with you, Esav. You can't say that to Esav. I don't want my children to learn from you. I don't want them to learn from your ways. I don't want them to learn from your behaviors. Go on ahead. I'll catch up. We'll make it. We'll catch up. We'll catch up at a later point. That's miyad achi. Where's the second instance in this week's parasha? A very terrible instance. Dinah is kidnapped and she's violated. Yaakov shama ki timeh et Dinah bito. She's violated by Shechem. Now Shechem, he violates Dinah, but he's attached to Dinah. He can't let go of Dinah. So what does he do? He sends his father Hamor, go strike a deal. See if we can, if our families can truly become family. Vaydaber Hamor itam lemor Shechem beni chashka nafsho bevitechem. He really desires your daughter. Tenuna ota lo leisha. Give her over as a wife to him. Vehit hatenu otanu benotechem titenu lanu ve'ed benotenu tikhu lachem. You'll give us your daughters, we'll give you our daughters, and we'll be one big happy family. Second instance of let's join together, let's assimilate, let's become one. This is what Yaakov Avinu. In the same parasha, you don't have to go far. You don't even have to go to Chanukah. Happens to be Chanukah is next week, and Chanukah is not about genocide. It's about assimilation. But already in the same parasha, you could say, Yaakov, what are you so worried about? Hatzileni na miyad achi miyad esav. For his descendants, for his great-great-grandchildren. No, in the same parasha, there's already the potential, there's already the threat, which Yaakov sees as an existential threat of assimilation, of getting too close. Esav says, let's travel together. Hamor says, look, let's become one family. You'll give us your daughters, we'll give you our daughters. This is exactly what Yaakov was afraid of. In the same parasha, you don't have to go far. You don't have to go to 2023. You don't have to go to 60% assimilation rates in the United States. You don't have to go to 90% assimilation rates in Brazil. You go in the same parasha, and Yaakov Avinu, Klal Yisrael is in its infancy, already dealing with the threat of assimilation. Already he's seeing red flags. Already he has to be on guard to make sure that Am Yisrael is not influenced. So much so that we said that the entire parasha is, we called it Parashat HaGalut. It's talking about the Jew in exile. If you look, what does it say when Yaakov Avinu is fighting with the Malach? It says, Vayivater Yaakov levado. Yaakov was left alone that night, the night that the Malach, the angel of Esav, attacked him, and they wrestled the entire night. Vayivater Yaakov levado, vaye'avek ish imo. He was alone, and a man, a celestial being, an angel was wrestling with him ad alot hashachar, until dawn. You know how the Chachamim, you know how the rabbis understand this pasuk? Vayivater Yaakov levado. It's not only talking about Yaakov being left alone. We are going to be a nation that throughout history is going to be alone. What did we see since October 7th? Do we not feel more alone? More by ourselves? The world doesn't understand our pain, the atrocities that were done. Vayivater Yaakov levado. It is almost a rule in history. Esav soneh et Yaakov, Esav hate Yaakov. The Jewish people will be a nation that dwells alone. I'll just finish the pasuk, I'll get to your question. Vayivater Yaakov levado is not only referring to Yaakov Avinu. We said that this parasha is the parasha of Galut. It is to be studied in every generation that we are in exile. Vayivater Yaakov levado, we will be alone amongst the nation. We will be a nation that dwells alone. Vaye'avek ish imo, and in every generation we will wrestle. We will have to wrestle for survival. Ad alot hashachar. What's alot hashachar? Until dawn, until Mashiach comes. That's what the pasuk is saying. It's not only talking about Yaakov Avinu, it is talking about the situation of the Jewish people throughout history. Yes, if you feel alone, yes, we dwell. We have few friends in the world. We dwell alone in the world. And if you keep reading, Vayach ki lo yachol, but don't worry. As bad as sometimes it gets, ki lo yacholo. They're going to try to inflict, they're going to try to hurt us and injure us. Ki lo yacholo. He's not winning. He's still there. The Jewish people, you can't finish them off. Vayiga bekaf yerecho. Yes, he will hit him in his thigh. He will do some damage. We will unfortunately lose Jews to assimilation and other dangers throughout the history. But ultimately, Kilo yacholo. Ultimately, how does that entire parasha end off? The Yaakov comes complete. Yes, that description of that fight between Yaakov and the Malach, that is a description of the Jewish people throughout history. Even when it says, what was one of the tactics, what was one of the strategies that Yaakov employed? If we look at this parasha in the context of the Jewish people as in exile, what was one of the tactics that Yaakov used? Yaakov took his camp, he took his family, and he split them into two camps. What's the inyan of splitting them into two camps? It says, Vayomer, in yavo Esav el hamachaneh achat, if Esav is able to reach one of the camps, vehikahu, and he's able to smite them, he's able to strike them, vayam machaneh nishar lifleta. The other camp will be able to get away. What do we see throughout history? That when the Jews had problems in one country, many times it was fine for them in another country. You always see throughout history that there was always two camps, exactly like it says in the parasha. It says, "Vayira Yaakov me'od." Yaakov was very fearful. He was very scared. Vayetzer lo vayahatz ta'am asher ito v'tatzon. He split the nation, the people that were with him, lishne machanot, into two camps. Once again, Vayomer im yavo Esav el hamachaneh ha'achad vehikahu. If Esav is able to reach one of the camps and is able to smite them down, v'haya hamachaneh nishar lifleta. The other camp, the other part will be able to get away. That's been our story throughout history. Anytime you have one nation that is that is being very difficult with us, one people, a lot of times in another land, they open the doors. It's peaceful for the Jewish people. For example, when there was the Spanish Inquisition, the Turkish government invited all the Jews to come to their country, and that's the way it's been throughout history. Where did the Jewish people, you could say America, but where did the Jewish people rebuild themselves after World War II? In Eretz Yisrael. So you always find that idea, that concept. It wasn't only in the time of Yaakov Avinu, and it's what Yaakov Avinu does is symbolic for all of history. If in one area it's troublesome for the Jews, Hashem has another area waiting for the Jews. I'm sorry, you had a question? Oh, okay.
What was it that the angel was asking to go back to Shema? Was it to pray Shakri?
It was his morning to sing to HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Oh, to sing.
Yeah, it was his morning. It was his morning to say shira. To say shira. Therefore, he was asking Yaakov Avinu to be able to go back. In any case, this week's parasha.
No, what were you?
Oh, she was asking the malach that was wrestling with Yaakov Avinu. So they wrestled. They kind of came to a stalemate. And he asked Yaakov Avinu, allow me to leave, allow me to go back. And Yaakov Avinu refused to let go of him till he gave him a bracha. And then finally And then finally he allowed him to go back. To really emphasize this point, what are we saying? So we're saying the famous idea, the famous explanation that's been said so many times. Hatzileni na miyad achi miyad esav. Yaakov is praying for two different situations. The Jewish people have an existential threat when Esav is behaving like a brother, when he's behaving with love, and there's also an existential threat certainly when he wants to commit genocide. I saw a beautiful question. In our parasha, Hakadosh Baruch Hu appears to Yaakov Avinu, and he says to him, "V'shamavti bekol asher telech." Wherever you go, I will protect you. I will look over you. You have nothing to worry about. If that's the case, why was Yaakov Avinu so scared? What was Yaakov? He had a promise. He had aftacha from God that Hashem will always watch over him and He will take care of him. That being the case, why was Yaakov Avinu so scared? So I saw a beautiful answer. What does it mean that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to watch over you? I'll watch over you. Don't worry, Esav won't be able to kill you. However, we have a rule. The Gemara says, Hakol bidei shamayim. Everything is in the hands of heaven, chutz, except for one aspect, one area in life, yirat shamayim. Hakol bidei shamayim, chutz mi yirat shamayim. Hatzileni na miyad achi miyad esav. The way Yaakov Avinu understood God's promises, yes, I will make sure that Esav cannot commit, that he can't wipe you off. However, as far as Yirat Shamayim is concerned, as far as fear of heaven is concerned, as far as keeping Torah and Mitzvot and not being influenced, that's not in the hands of God. That's in the hands of a person. That's Hakol Bidei Shamayim, Chutz Mi Yirat, except for Yirat Shamayim. That's why Yaakov Avinu was so scared. That's why he says, Atzileni na miyad achi, miyad esav. What do you mean? God has a promise. He's going to protect you. Yes, He's going to protect me. But as far as us living together in brotherhood and in camaraderie, etc., that's up to the person. That's Hakol Bidei Shamayim, Chutz Mi Yirat Shamayim. I'll bring you a proof. By Purim, how were we saved? We were saved through a miracle. God did a miracle. Megillat Esther. They're hidden miracles, but God did hidden miracles. On Chanukah, how were we saved? We had to go to war. Once we went to war, then God performed miracles. But we had to go to war. By Purim, you see that God first performed the miracles, then we went to war. By Chanukah, first we went to war, then God performed the miracles. You see that? Why is it the opposite? Why is it by Purim? First we were quote unquote saved, then they were given permission to fight back and defend themselves, and then there was a war, and the Jews were victorious. By Chanukah it's the opposite. The miracles came after the war. By Purim the miracles came before the war. Why? Did you ever think of that? Why is it like that? So the answer is what did we say? What was the threat by Purim? It was genocide. The threat was a Holocaust. What was the threat by Chanukah? It was assimilation. You have to go to war. You want to continue to be Jewish? You really believe in Torah and Mitzvot? You really want to do Shabbat? Show me that you're ready to go to war for it. Show me just how important your life is, so to speak, not in danger. Show me the Jewish people had first to show God, yes, I want to be a Jew. I don't want to assimilate. I want Shabbat. I want Brit Milah. I want Rosh Chodesh. I want Taharat HaMishpacha. I want these things. Are you ready to go to war for it? Because the threat wasn't genocide by Chanukah, it was assimilation. First the Jewish people had to prove to God, and it was really just a small group, yes, we're ready to die for this. We want this so badly, we're ready to die for this. Once they demonstrated they're ready to die for it, then God brought the miracles. Because the threat wasn't a threat of genocide, it was a threat of assimilation. Since it was a threat of assimilation, they had to demonstrate beyond a shadow of a doubt, I don't want to assimilate. I want my Shabbat, I want my Tefillin, I want my Tzitzit, I want my mitzvot, and I'm ready to fight for it. Once they demonstrated it, then God did the miracles. Then they find that one shemen. That's what Chanukah is about. That's what Tatzileni na miyad achi. But we first have to demonstrate. That's why Yaakov was so careful. Esav, you go on ahead. The Chamor presents him. Yeah, let's become one big happy family. You give us our daughters, we'll give you our daughters. No, that's not the way it works. That's not what I want. But we already see in the infancy, in already in the time of Yaakov, There were threats of assimilation. And that's really what the next few parashiot are about. And that ties into Chanukah. Yosef, he's in Egypt, he's all alone. Nice Jewish boy, grew up in a nice home, nice Jewish boy, ends up in Egypt all alone. And then there's this woman that's making these advances towards this nice Jewish boy. That's what these parashiot are about. That's what this time is about. That's what Chanukah is about. That we have to have sometimes you have to have this superhuman strength to say, no, I will not be influenced. I will not assimilate. I will stand up for Shabbat. I will stand up for Torah. I will stand up for mitzvot. But that's going to be part of the narrative in the next few weeks. Bezrat Hashem, hopefully Bezrat Hashem next time, speak about the parasha. We'll get more into the Yanim of Chanukah.